North Korea has developed almost entire set of ballistic cruise missiles, Russian Envoy. North Korea has developed almost an entire set of ballistic and cruise missiles, but Pyongyang is not planning to attack the United States, Japan, or South Korea, Russian ambassador to North Korea Alexander Matskara has said in an interview with the media. One should admit that the North Korean military-industrial complex has achieved impressive results in the last 10 years, the ambassador said. It has developed an almost complete set of ballistic and cruise missiles and conducted dozens of test launches. He said Pyongyang's development of new ballistic missiles and its successive tests were a direct result of Washington's hostile policy toward North Korea, adding that the North Korean leadership would have no reason to develop and implement large-scale nuclear missile programs if there were no aggression. Increasing military, political, and economic pressure, attempts to interfere in domestic affairs, and direct threats to eliminate the socio-political system there. North Koreans, of course, are not planning to attack the US, Japan or South Korea, neither invade these countries nor change their political order, he underscored. Matskara further pointed out that none of North Korea's test missile launches have created any threat to Russia's far eastern regions. The Korean side has repeatedly stated that it strictly follows this principle. We have no reason not to trust it, the Russian diplomat said. In mid-April, North Korea test-fired a new Hwasong-18 solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile, which was launched toward the Sea of Japan, having flown about 1,000 kilometers, 621 miles, and landed outside Japan's exclusive economic zone. The drill marked the 9th launch of ballistic missiles in 2023 and the 12th launch along with cruise missiles. In 2022, North Korea test-fired 37 ballistic missiles. Republicans, White House see progress in U.S. debt ceiling talks. Negotiators for Democratic President Joe Biden and top congressional Republican Kevin McCarthy held what both sides called productive talks on Wednesday to try to reach a deal to raise the United States' $31.4 trillion debt ceiling and avoid a catastrophic default. After a 4-hour White House meeting, U.S. House Speaker McCarthy said negotiations had improved and would continue in the evening. He predicted the two sides would reach an agreement, though several issues remain unresolved. We've made some progress working down there. So that's very positive, said McCarthy. I want to make sure we get the right agreement. I can see that we're working towards that. White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre said talks remain fruitful. If it keeps going in good faith, we can reach an agreement here. But the White House and congressional Democrats also accused Republicans of taking the economy hostage to advance an agenda they could otherwise not pass. They said Republicans need to make more concessions as they will need Democratic votes to pass any deal. Just listen to members of the House Freedom Caucus, now openly referring to the full faith and credit of the United States as a hostage, Jean-Pierre said. Ratings agencies have taken note of the impasse with McCarthy insisting on spending cuts while Biden wants to hold spending steady. Fitch put the United States AAA ratings on negative watch on Wednesday. The agency said it believes risks have risen that the debt ceiling will not be raised before the so-called X date, when the Treasury runs out of money, adding that increased political partisanship is hindering reaching a resolution. Moody's, another rating agency, might change its assessment of U.S. debt if lawmakers indicate a default is expected. Moody's currently has a top-notch AAA rating for U.S. debt. A lower rating could push up borrowing costs. Time is running short, as the Treasury Department has warned the federal government could be unable to pay all its bills by as soon as June 1 and it will take several days to pass legislation through the narrowly divided Congress. House Republican leaders said they would adjourn on Thursday for a week-long Memorial Day holiday recess scheduled but would call lawmakers back if needed for any votes, Punchbowl News reported. McCarthy has insisted that any deal must not raise taxes and must cut discretionary spending, not hold it steady as Biden has proposed. Any deal that Biden and McCarthy reach will have a narrow path for passage through the divided Congress. where McCarthy's Republicans hold a 222 to 213 House majority and Biden's Democrats control the Senate by a 51 to 49 margin. The lack of progress has heightened concerns that Congress could inadvertently trigger a crisis by failing to act in time. "We are certainly getting to a place that's too close for comfort," said Shai Akaba of the Bipartisan Policy Center, a think tank. The months-long standoff has spooked Wall Street, weighing on U.S. stocks and pushing the nation's cost of borrowing higher. U.S. stock indexes fell on Wednesday on debt ceiling concerns. "Up until yesterday, investors have been very optimistic," said Angelo Koukafas, senior investment strategist at Edward Jones. "But now as we get closer, we are seeing some caution again." Chinese war simulation finds top U.S. carrier group could be destroyed with certainty. War games conducted by Chinese researchers found the U.S. military's most prized aircraft carrier could be reliably sunk with relative ease in the event of a hot war in the South China Sea. A volley of hypersonic missiles could reliably sink the U.S. military's most powerful aircraft carrier group in a potential conflict, according to war game simulations carried out by a team of Chinese military planners. Using 24 of their most advanced anti-ship missiles, Chinese forces consistently destroyed a carrier fleet led by the USS Gerald R. Ford over the course of 20 mock battles and simulations which were run on a war game platform employed by the People's Liberation Army. In the simulation, the U.S. ships came under fire after ignoring multiple Chinese warnings not to approach an island in the South China Sea controlled by Beijing. For test purposes, the war game's designers used a carrier group made up of 6 surface ships which were selected for their unparalleled strength and advanced technology. A major Hong Kong-based newspaper reported that the military planners selected vessels deemed the U.S. Navy's most superior, the CVN-78 Gerald R. Ford. Accompanied by a CG-56 Ticonderoga-class cruiser the San Jacinto, and 4 DDG-103R Lee Burke-class flight IIA-guided missile destroyers. Led by CAO Hong Song from the North University of China, the researchers found that virtually every U.S. surface vessel was ravaged by the attack and eventually sank. According to researchers, the Ford carrier group, which was once thought to be all but unsinkable, could actually be destroyed with certainty using just a handful of hypersonic missile strikes. Chinese military planners placed a number of constraints on themselves in the simulation, including cutting their access to space-based spy satellites and limiting the number of hypersonic missiles available. The basic principle underlying the exercise was to be lenient with the enemy and strict with oneself, CAO explained. As the Hong Kong-based outlet explained, during the simulation, the PLA used its sea-based surveillance network to detect and identify the U.S. carrier group before firing 8 of the less reliable hypersonic missiles simultaneously from southern and central sites in China. Though some of the missiles were intercepted, the attack depleted the U.S. fleet's SM-3 munitions, paving the way for the PLA to launch 8 of its more accurate hypersonic missiles from northern and western China, with 4 focused on the aircraft carrier while the others targeted the destroyers, the outlet noted. After the attack, 4 ships survived from the blue U.S. team, with the destroyers having the most remaining, on average. A mop-up operation with 6 of the less accurate hypersonic missiles was able to dispatch with the remaining vessels, the research paper determined. After the simulation was run 20 times to allow for different variables which could affect the outcome of the engagement, the team's strategy was ultimately able to eliminate an average of 5.6 out of 6 surface vessels, effectively meaning the total destruction of the carrier group. The release of a paper detailing the war game in May marked the first time the results of simulated hypersonic strikes against a U.S. carrier group have been made public by China's military, the Hong Kong outlet noted. But it's likely to be seen as a warning to Washington against any provocations in the South China Sea. An anonymous Beijing-based researcher interviewed by the outlet suggested that greater transparency about China's military capabilities and intentions could help to reduce misunderstandings and miscalculations on both sides, which could in turn help to reduce the risk of conflict. Sri Lanka making good progress in debt restructuring talks, President Crisis-stricken Sri Lanka should be able to conclude newly launched debt restructuring talks by September, or November at the latest, its president said on Thursday, adding that the negotiations had made remarkable progress. Sri Lanka secured a $2.9 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in March and has previously said it aims to complete talks on restructuring debt owed to bilateral creditors and overseas bondholders by September. It was not clear whether President Ranil Wickremesinghe's comments signaled a possible delay in the process. He was speaking as he began a meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida at the latter's office in Tokyo. The two leaders affirmed the importance of adhering to transparent and fair debt restructuring, according to a summary issued by Japan. We have made remarkable headway as far as the debt restructuring talks are concerned, Wickremesinghe said. We should be able to conclude by September, or November, at the latest, which he said would mark an end to Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Kishida's meeting with the Sri Lankan leader, their first since last September, is unlikely to generate a new initiative, but both sides would take stock of the efforts to restructure debt, a Japanese official told Reuters. Last month, France, India, and Japan unveiled a common platform for talks among bilateral creditors to coordinate restructuring of the debt. We have now started a creditors' meeting and all for a successful conclusion before the end of 2023, the president said. Sri Lanka is dedicated to ensure equal treatment for all creditors. We want this exercise to succeed because our experience will enable more middle-income countries to utilize the IMF in ensuring multilateral coordination for debt relief. The island nation defaulted on its foreign debt for the first time in its history in April last year as the worst financial crisis since independence from Britain in 1948 crushed its economy. The IMF called this week for timely restructuring pacts with the country's creditors. The global lenders said Sri Lanka's macroeconomic situation was improving, although earlier it had predicted the economy would contract 3% this year. Sri Lanka owes $7.1 billion to its creditors, with $3 billion owed to China, $1.6 billion to India and $2.4 billion to the Paris Club, a group of creditor nations. At the meeting with Kishida, Wickremesinghe expressed regret over past relations with Japan, when Sri Lanka called off a major infrastructure deal signed with Tokyo. The president suggested his country was now keen to restart multiple investment projects with Japan. We recommence the projects that were suspended or cancelled, he said. Trump mocks Republican rivals' campaign launch fail. Some users tuning into Ron DeSantis' announcement on Twitter Spaces had no sound, while others couldn't access it at all. Donald Trump has ridiculed Ron DeSantis after the Florida governor's live campaign launch for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination on Twitter Spaces was beset by multiple glitches on Wednesday. Wow. The DeSantis Twitter launch is a disaster. His whole campaign will be a disaster. Watch. The former president wrote on the Truth Social platform, adopting a shortened version of the DeSanctimonious nickname he has coined to describe his fellow GOP hopeful. In a separate post, Trump praised Senator Tim Scott's campaign, which was officially announced on Monday. The former U.S. leader did not miss the opportunity to compare Scott's launch with that of DeSantis, which he branded a catastrophe. The DeSantis campaign submitted a filing to the U.S. Federal Election Commission confirming his run for president on Wednesday afternoon, and hours later he made the announcement on Twitter Spaces with CEO Elon Musk. However, the virtual event was marred by technical issues, meaning some users were unable to hear the speakers or access the live broadcast altogether. The Florida governor was polling several percentage points ahead of Trump in the race for the Republican nomination as recently as February, according to a Yahoo/YouGov survey, although the former president has forged ahead in recent months. Despite his indictment on criminal charges of falsifying business records in New York City in early April, Trump now enjoys the support of 53% of Republican voters compared to 26% for DeSantis, a CNN poll on Wednesday indicated. All the other contenders for the GOP nomination are trailing far behind the pair. Trump has repeatedly criticized his main rival, calling DeSantis disloyal and a Reno, Republican in name only, globalist. The former president has also taken credit for DeSantis being elected as Florida governor in 2018. DeSantis has refused to engage in a war of words with Trump, stressing he does not spend my time trying to smear other Republicans. The Florida governor insisted that all his efforts were focused on defeating the Democrat incumbent, Joe Biden. Ron DeSantis jumps into White House race but Twitter launch marred by glitches. Governor of the U.S. State of Florida Ron DeSantis said on Wednesday he would seek the 2024 Republican nomination for president, but an audio interview on Twitter meant to showcase his entry into the race instead drew attention for technical snafus. DeSantis made his announcement in a video ahead of joining Twitter CEO Elon Musk on the platform. The broadcast of the interview, which had been intended to be the formal launch for the DeSantis campaign, at times lost sound and some users were either unable to join or were dropped. "We need the courage to lead and the strength to win," DeSantis said in the video posted on Twitter. "I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback." Supporters and donors will be keenly watching to see if DeSantis now takes the fight to the primary frontrunner Donald Trump, who has been relentlessly attacking him with little reaction, much to the frustration of some DeSantis allies who wanted him to respond more forcefully. "Government is not about entertainment, not about building a brand," DeSantis said, taking a veiled swipe at Trump. DeSantis' central argument for his candidacy likely will be that he is the only Republican who can defeat Democratic President Joe Biden, the winner over Trump in the 2020 election. "Our president, while he lacks vigor, flounders in the face of our nation's challenges and he takes cues from the woke mob," DeSantis said. But his much-touted online launch event started late, and then came off the rails entirely as the audio repeatedly cut out and many of the 400,000-plus users trying to listen were booted out of the conversation. "We've got just a massive number of people online, so the servers are straining somewhat," Musk could be heard saying. "It is really going crazy." While organizers sought to highlight the event's popularity, the Biden campaign was quick to capitalize on the glitches, tweeting a link to a fundraising page and stating, "This link works." In the Republican camp, Trump joked on his Truth Social platform that "my red button is bigger, better, stronger, and is working." Donald Trump Jr., Trump's eldest son, simply tweeted a hashtag disaster, while a Trump campaign spokesman said, "Glitchy. Tech issues. Uncomfortable silences. A complete failure to launch." And that's just the candidate. The hashtag disaster was trending on Twitter. The advertised conversation between Musk and DeSantis eventually began around 20 minutes late, although technical gremlins persisted, a setback mocked as encapsulating the downward turn the governor's image has taken of late. American decline is not inevitable. It is a choice, and we should choose a new direction, a path that will lead to American revitalization. "We must restore sanity to our nation," the 44-year-old right-winger said during the talk. Viable challenger? Long viewed as the most viable challenger to twice impeached Trump, DeSantis boasts deep Midwestern roots, a large campaign fund, a record of ultra-conservative legislative wins and an unblemished record of election victories. He was a baseball star at Yale, has a Harvard Law degree and completed 6 years of active duty with the Navy, including service in Iraq, as well as 5 years in the U.S. Congress and 4 as Florida's governor. While Trump has dominated headlines with his legal woes, DeSantis has presented himself as the tip of the spear in the struggle of ordinary Americans against progressive values he sees as divisive. DeSantis has used his position as Florida's chief executive to stack up a list of conservative accomplishments, signing off on some 80 state laws targeting woke indoctrination in schools and other public institutions. They include a ban on discussing gender identity and sexual orientation in schools, a block on funding efforts to promote diversity at public universities, and one of the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. DeSantis remains in a pitched battle with Walt Disney over the company's criticism of laws prohibiting the teaching of gender identity concepts in public schools. The company has filed a federal lawsuit accusing DeSantis of weaponizing the state government to punish its operations. DeSantis lacks Trump's national profile and the launch comes with his ratings in decline, as a number of policy missteps have prompted disquiet about his readiness to take on Trump. He now faces the daunting task of closing an enormous polling gap, with Trump posting leads of close to 40 percentage points despite being indicted on felony financial charges and being found liable for sexual abuse in a New York civil trial. Technical malfunctions notwithstanding, the Twitter launch format gave him potential access to Musk's 140 million followers, many of whom are in Trump's base, and the attention of a large section of the moderate voters he will likely need if he wins the party nomination. Musk said earlier that his presence at Wednesday's event would not constitute an endorsement but would reflect his desire to make the service more of a town square. Trump on the attack. Behind the scenes, the Trump and DeSantis camps have been jostling to secure endorsements from state lawmakers while, at the national level, Florida's congressional delegation has broken heavily for Trump. But DeSantis is seen as lacking the natural charm needed to peel away some of the 14 million voters who backed Trump in the last competitive Republican primary, in 2016. Trump has not posted on Twitter since his 2-year ban over the 2021 U.S. Capitol riot ended in November, but has been using his own social network to attack DeSantis almost daily. In a Wednesday morning post, Trump said the governor desperately needs a personality transplant and, to the best of my knowledge, they are not medically available yet. Other declared Republican candidates include Nikki Haley, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, and Tim Scott, a U.S. senator from South Carolina. U.S. frustrated over Ukrainian attack in Russia. The White House has been pretty darn clear with Kiev about the use of US-supplied weapons, John Kirby has said. Washington has again dismissed visual proof of US-supplied equipment used in this week's attack by Ukrainian militants in Russia's Belgorod region as unconfirmed reports but admitted the images require further investigation. President Joe Biden's administration, however, has apparently acknowledged concern that Kiev might have broken its alleged pledge not to use American weaponry outside its own territory. White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby spoke of frustration over the attack during a press briefing on Wednesday, U.S. media outlet Politico reported. He noted that the administration is looking into the footage indicating that US-supplied equipment could have been involved in a deadly raid in the Belgorod district of Graverin. We've been pretty darn clear that we don't support the use of US-made equipment for attacks inside Russia, Kirby told reporters. We've been clear about that with the Ukrainians. I won't get into private discussions that we were having with them, but I think we've been nothing but consistent about our concerns in that regard. Kirby's comments came one day after U.S. State Department and Pentagon officials tried to cast doubt on photos and video footage clearly showing that the militants used American gear, including Humvees and Max Pro MRAP armored fighting vehicles. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller called the evidence fuzzy pictures and told reporters the U.S. administration is skeptical of their veracity. The high-quality images, including footage released by the Russian Defense Ministry, showed multiple damaged and abandoned U.S. vehicles. The military said dozens of saboteurs were killed in a counterterrorism operation, while some were pushed back into the territory of Ukraine. Kiev has attempted to disavow the raid by claiming it was carried out by the so-called Freedom of Russia Legion and Russian Volunteer Corps, RDK, neo-Nazi units. The Kremlin responded that it was a distinction without a difference, as the militants fought in the Ukrainian military using equipment provided by the West. The Pentagon also said the U.S. hadn't approved any transfers of equipment to paramilitary organizations outside the Ukrainian armed forces. U.S. President Joe Biden has tried to lead an international sanctions campaign against Russia and provide billions of dollars worth of military aid to Ukraine without triggering a direct war with Russia. Publicly, U.S. officials always claimed that the ground rules prohibiting the use of US-made equipment outside Ukrainian territory are part of that effort, seeking to distance Washington from any incursions on Russian soil. During a press briefing on Saturday, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Washington is going to proceed in a way that avoids World War III. That precept has remained intact. However, Russian officials consider the US to be a direct party to the Ukraine conflict as it provides increasingly advanced weaponry to Kiev. Earlier this month, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov accused Washington of facilitating Kiev's terrorist attacks in Russia, including a Moscow drone strike alleged to be a Ukrainian attempt to assassinate Russian President Vladimir Putin. Iran unveils ballistic missile with range of 2,000 kilometers, IRNA. Iran tested a 2,000 km range ballistic missile on Thursday, Iranian state media said, 2 days after the chief of Israel's armed forces raised the prospect of action against Tehran over its nuclear program. Iran, which has one of the biggest missile programs in the Middle East, says its weapons are capable of reaching Israel and U.S. bases in the region. Despite opposition from the United States and European countries, Tehran has said it would further develop its defensive missile program. Our message to Iran's enemies is that we will defend the country and its achievements. Our message to our friends is that we want to help regional stability, said Iranian Defense Minister Mohammad Reza Ashtiani. State TV broadcast what it said was footage of an upgraded version of Iran's Karam-Shar 4 ballistic missile with a range of 2,000 kilometers that can carry a 1,500 kilogram warhead. State news agency IRNA said the missile was called Kibar, a reference to a Jewish castle overrun by Muslim warriors in the early days of Islam. Israel, which the Islamic Republic does not recognize, sees Iran as an existential threat. Iran says its ballistic missiles are an important deterrent and retaliatory force against the United States, Israel, and other potential regional adversaries. On Tuesday, the top Israeli general raised the prospect of action against Iran as efforts by 6 world powers to revive Tehran's 2015 nuclear deal have stalled since last September amid growing Western fears about Tehran's accelerating nuclear advances. The nuclear agreement, which Washington ditched in 2018, imposed restrictions on Iran's nuclear activities that extended the time Tehran would need to produce enough fissile material for a nuclear bomb if it chose to. Iran denies seeking nuclear weapons. China responds to NATO initiative in Japan. The US-led military bloc should not extend its reach beyond the North Atlantic, Beijing has insisted. China has urged Japan to act responsibly after Tokyo confirmed that it is in talks to build a NATO liaison office on its territory, saying Beijing would not accept bloc confrontation in the Asia-Pacific. Asked about the plans during a Wednesday press briefing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said NATO should remain within its own sphere of influence and not seek to grow its presence in Asia. NATO claims to be a regional organization and should not extend its geopolitical reach. The Asia-Pacific does not welcome bloc confrontation or military blocs, she said, adding given Japan's history of aggression, it needs to be prudent on military and security issues and make sure its actions are conducive to regional peace and stability. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida confirmed reports about the proposed liaison office earlier on Wednesday, telling lawmakers that discussions are underway, but that he was not aware of any decision made. He noted that Tokyo would not seek to join NATO, despite stepped-up cooperation with the bloc in recent years. It is unclear exactly what role the office in Japan might serve, but sources cited by the Nikkei Asia outlet said it would likely be a one-man station meant to facilitate consultations with allied officials. NATO has been open about its intentions to expand into the Pacific. Last summer, it invited several Indo-Pacific countries to a summit for the first time, while Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia are expected to attend a major event in July. Japan also recently hosted a delegation from NATO's Cooperative Security Division, which met with senior military leaders in April to discuss the current military cooperation and opportunities to foster a stronger partnership. Beijing has voiced opposition to the liaison office before, urging its neighbors to maintain high vigilance as NATO looks for a foothold in the region. Earlier this month, the Foreign Ministry warned that the bloc's interference in local affairs and continued eastward expansion would inevitably undermine regional peace and stability, insisting Asia must not become a wrestling ground for geopolitical competition. Aussie woman, 95, dies after being tasered by police in nursing home. Police in the Australian state of New South Wales, NSW, confirmed that a 95-year-old woman died in hospital on Wednesday, a week after she was tasered by a police officer in the state's south. Mrs. Nowland passed away peacefully in hospital just after 7 p.m. This evening, NSW police force said in a statement, "Our thoughts and condolences remain with those who were lucky enough to know, love, and be loved by Mrs. Nowland during a life she led hallmarked by family, kindness, and community," the police added. NSW Police Commissioner Karen Webb told reporters also on Wednesday that a 33-year-old senior constable, who was involved in the taser incident, was charged with 3 offenses, including recklessly inflicting grievous bodily harm, assault occasioning actual bodily harm, and common assault. The charges could possibly be upgraded. "It depends on what happens," said Webb. On May 17, dementia-suffered Nowland sustained injuries during an interaction with police at the Yalombi Lodge in Kuma town. The 95-year-old was taken to the Kuma District Hospital, remaining in critical condition. According to a briefing by NSW Police Force Assistant Commissioner Peter Cotter, when the 95-year-old was tasered, she was approaching police at a slow pace. She had a walking frame with a knife in her hand. It is fair to say that she was armed with that knife. The knife in question was a steak knife, a serrated edge knife that she had obtained from the kitchen area of the nursing home a couple of hours earlier, said Cotter. Police officers tried to convince the elderly woman to drop the knife, but she failed to do so. One of the police officers who responded, the senior constable, activated his taser which struck Claire, whereby she fell to the ground, striking her head, Cotter noted. The assistant commissioner pointed out that the injury, which Nowland suffered as a result of hitting her head on the floor, rendered her bedridden. Tories accused of betrayal as immigration to UK hits 600k record high. British PM Rishi Sunak has promised voters he will stop the trafficking of tens of thousands of illegal immigrants across the English Channel. But he has dropped his predecessor Boris Johnson's pledge to keep net immigration below 250,000 per year. Net annual immigration to the UK has hit a record high of over 600,000 despite government promises to bring it down. Much anticipated data from the Office for National Statistics published on Thursday showed that around 1.2 million people had moved to Britain over the past year, with 557,000 emigrating for a balance of 606,000. That broke the previous net influx record of 504,000 recorded just a year earlier. The data will be embarrassing for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who pledged earlier this year to stop illegal immigration. However, he refused to commit to his predecessor Boris Johnson's commitment to get net immigration under 250,000, saying only that he aimed to keep it below the 500,000 mark he inherited. The immigrants included 925,000 from non-European Union countries, 151,000 from the EU despite the end of free movement to and from the bloc with Brexit in 2021 and 88,000 British nationals who had been living overseas. Those figures were driven by a boom in foreign students at British universities, recruitment of skilled workers from Africa and Asia to fill vacant jobs, the government's blanket offer of citizenship to Hong Kong Chinese and refugees from the conflict in Ukraine. But the country has also seen tens of thousands of illegal immigrants trafficked by sea from continental Europe over the past year. Television presenter Nigel Farage, founder of the Brexit Party now the Reform Party, accused Sunak's government of betraying the electorate. These figures are a total breach of trust between voters and this government, Farage tweeted. The population explosion continues, our quality of life is declining and all the government will do is to give us more lives. Reform Party leader Richard Tice suggested that the Conservative government was more interested in trendy environmental policies than in controlling immigration. Tories have betrayed us and lied to us, Tice tweeted. They deliberately allowed net immigration in 2022 to soar to 606,000. It will be the same or even more in 2023. Result, unaffordable housing and longer waiting lists. David Curtin, leader of the small social conservative Heritage Party, went further and called for the UK to withdraw from international treaties on migration, return trafficked migrants to France and limit work and student visas. On a TV appearance on Thursday morning, the PM conceded that the immigration figures were too high, stressing that they included 150,000 dependents of those in the UK on student visas. Numbers are too high, it's as simple as that, Sunak said. And I want to bring them down. South Sudan secures $70 million US grant for women empowerment. The World Bank on Wednesday granted $70 million US to South Sudan to boost women's social and economic empowerment, SUSE, an official said. World Bank country manager for South Sudan Firas Rod said the grant is aimed at supporting female entrepreneurs in formalizing and scaling up their business activities and helping survivors of gender-based violence. GBV, access vital services that will enable them to recover and rebuild their lives. Rod said the project focuses on women and youth to help reduce fragility, facilitate peace building, and promote inclusive development. He said the project takes a holistic approach aiming to strengthen the public sector's capacity to engage more actively in the area of women's empowerment to ensure long-term benefits for future generations of South Sudanese women and girls. Survivors of gender-based violence require substantial support to recover from the physical and psychological trauma that they have endured. This project will help expand their access to vital health services and psychosocial support, and will work on strengthening the prevention of GBV, Rod told journalists in Juba, South Sudan's capital. He noted that the project will also help women to grow their businesses and improve their livelihoods by providing grants, training, and technical assistance. The SUSE comprises 4 components that aim at holistically addressing the specific challenges affecting the growth and development of women in South Sudan, including community-based socio-economic empowerment of women, establishing a women's entrepreneurial opportunity facility, providing services for survivors of GBV, and supporting institutional strengthening and project management. Benjamin Werrell, Minister for Gender, Child and Social Welfare, said women have supported their families and communities for generations by engaging in entrepreneurial activities. However, their progress has often been constrained by a mixture of prevailing social norms, institutional impediments, and insufficient access to education, training, business services, and financing. Empowering women to participate fully in civic and economic life will make South Sudan more prosperous and peaceful. With improved financial security, other areas of women's lives will also improve, as they can more easily afford health services, send their children to school, and are more likely to serve in leadership roles in their communities and become agents of change, Benjamin said. Patrushev held talks with colleagues from Serbia, India, Ghana, Russian Security Council. Russian Security Council Secretary Nikolai Patrushev held talks with colleagues from Serbia, India, Ghana, and Rwanda, the council said in a statement. The talks were held on the sidelines of an international security meeting under the auspices of the Russian Security Council. Nikolai Patrushev met with Security Intelligence Agency Director Alexander Vulin. Further development of Russian-Serbian relations were discussed, according to the statement. At the meeting with India's Deputy National Security Advisor Rajinder Khanna, the sides confirmed readiness to expand bilateral contacts between ministries and departments. Security on the African continent was considered at the meeting with Ghana's Minister of National Security Albert Gondepa. Similar issues were discussed with Secretary General of the National Intelligence and Security Services of Rwanda, Joseph Nzabamwita.